And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we batting, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a liquor, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing. Here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here come the West Indies. I'll tell you now. Here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them bad boys gonna bring you to your knees. Here come the West Indies. Special request to the Trinity posse. And what about the Guyana posse? And what about the Jamaica posse?
It's the summer of 1984, and as the West Indies take to the field against England, under captain Clive Lloyd, a new world order in cricket is about to be confirmed. England's batsmen face a fearsome, fast bowling attack.
Cricket, lovely cricket, and this is how I saw it. England has tried their best, but West Indies has won the test.
Good ball. Getting out of bed, you know you're going to face Holding, Garner, Marshall. You thought, well, where do you hide?
Oh, he's gone, caught behind. Gower goes straight after T. And Garner.
Matching the ferocity of their bowlers is the awesome batting power of Vivian Richards.
But what you got here is power.
Magnificent hit. There it is, 100 for Vivian Richards and a beautiful stroke with which to bring it up.
This was more than just a series of test matches for the West Indies. Those involved knew that a special kind of pride was at stake in what they did on the pitch.
They want the West Indies team to win every match they play so that they can walk around feeling proud to be West Indians and go to their workplaces and walk in there feeling as if they are somebody and they mean something.
For West Indians, cricket has been part of a struggle to escape a history disfigured by racial conflict and the legacy of empire. When politicians have failed them, they have turned to their cricket team for a sense of nationhood. So when in 1984, Clive Lloyd's team completed an historic 5-0 series victory over England,
On his court, it's all over.
this was the peoples of the old empire striking back in a way that all West Indians understood went beyond the boundary.
It didn't begin with Viv Richards. This thing is a long story. There's no shortcut. There's much more to West Indies cricket than just hitting a cricket ball.
Suspect Marshall has 7 wickets.
A superb exhibition.
And Sobers welcomes him with typical aggression.
Hall, the world's hurls one down against England.
And what a triumph for the West Indies and their passport.
Cricket has been described as the glue that binds the West Indies together, creating a sense of a single West Indian identity. It is the only test-playing nation which doesn't represent one country. Consisting of 10 sovereign nations, from Jamaica in the northern Caribbean, the West Indies form an arc of islands, including Barbados and Trinidad, down to Guyana on the northeastern coast of South America.
It is very important because it's one of the few things that we do together. Although they're islands and we bring one nation together, they all have their own flags and anthems and so on. So to play under that one banner of West Indies cricket it's an exciting one, but very challenging.
There is strength in this cultural diversity, which can be seen in the way West Indians play the game.
If you start at the top of the archipelago, Jamaicans bring and Antiguans bring an aggression and a huge confident talent. As you go around, you come to Barbados and you find graft and concentration. The proper Bajan will never get himself out when the score is 25 for 4. Now a Trinidadian will hit that ball for 6. He'll either be out huge or be a huge success.
But when cricket first arrived in the Caribbean in the 18th century, black West Indians were excluded from the sport. Like every aspect of society, cricket was in the grip of slavery and intended for whites only.
Black people would not have been allowed to play. However, they had a role peripherally. They would be sent to retrieve the ball from the ubiquitous cane fields. There were cane fields everywhere.
The physical strength needed to work in the cane fields meant the slaves developed a more athletic physique than their white masters, and they identified returning the cricket ball as their one chance to demonstrate this power.
They would have imposed this on themselves, as trying to throw the ball back as far as possible and as accurately as possible back to the wicketkeeper or fielder, something of the sort. As the game developed, they were called in to bowl to the white batsmen. And this now became a big challenge. That here at last, I've got a license to bowl to Massa, the man who owns me. This is one arena where I could now confront him not just as an equal, but probably even as somebody superior.
After slavery was abolished in 1834, black West Indians began to be called to play alongside whites, who needed them to make up a playing 11. By the turn of the 20th century, black and white were playing together. And in 1906, one of the first West Indian teams to visit England included black players. But the racial stereotypes which divided West Indian society also dictated the roles played on the cricket field.
The tradition of West Indies cricket spoke in terms of a division of labor on the game of play along lines of race and class. Batsmanship was seen as the art of the white player. The fast bowlers were seen almost as if they were laborers, and the young black men would be the fast bowlers and the outfielders, and that was how the game was framed.
Out of Trinidad in the 1920s emerged a cricketer who would challenge this apartheid.
Larry Constantine, Larry, I never bold the body line. Honesty and integrity are the sum total of Sir Larry.
Larry Constantine learned to master every part of the game on Port of Spain's Savannah pitches.
Here was a man who could bat number 4, who could open the bowling and field at cover point. It was an absolute phenomenal achievement. He was a complete and all-round player.
Constantine's bowling, batting and fielding were all executed with a flair and panache which set the template for how West Indians would play the game.
He was a showman, but he represented the model for West Indies cricket. This was how we were going to play our cricket. We were going to play aggressive cricket. We were going to play creative, artistic cricket. We were going to be athletic in the field. Our fast bowlers must have long runs and must bowl quickly. And the batsmen must be very different from the British batsmen. They must be creative, play all the strokes, and they must be entertaining in the process.
Constantine was part of the West Indies team which travelled to England for their first test match in 1928. Captained by former army officer R.K. Noons, Constantine knew that it was inconceivable that a black West Indian could lead the team. But the West Indies were beaten 3-0, and Constantine soon began to feel that a black captain was needed for the team to progress.
Cricket in the West Indies is the most obvious example of the black man being held back. And West Indies cricket will never reach its full potential until it has a black captain.
Constantine inspired black West Indian cricketers, and in the 1930s, a specialist batsman from Jamaica surfaced. George Headley challenged the stereotype that only white players could bat at the top of the order. In 1935, Headley, batting at number 3, scored an unbeaten 270, leading the West Indies to their first ever series victory over England in the Caribbean.
He was a tremendous player, one who proved to West Indians that we do have players here who could really compare with any, and even the great Bradman, because everyone said Headley was the black Bradman. People here said no, Bradman was a white Headley, and so on. And of course, being a black Jamaican from a humble background, that made him more of an icon because the masses could identify with him.
Headley and Constantine were the first cricket heroes to black West Indians, and their achievements on...
Hello there, and welcome to today's edition of Cricket 101. It's a Sunday evening, and we are ready to roll. We are ready to roll here on Politics 101, our sports edition, our cricket edition, Cricket 101. Just putting the show in context there, some cricket history, West Indies cricket history. I think there are a couple of things that we can take away today. Our first great cricket superstar, Larry Constantine. Our first great West Indian batsman, George Headley. And the context in which the game developed, in many regards, was a political context. A political context. Hence, the way in which we see our cricket. C.L.R. James would have laid the groundwork, if you will. He was the pioneer in seeing what he called cricket beyond the boundary, And it is that framework that we use on this program in our analysis of cricket. You see, sometimes people analyze cricket as a game. And if you analyze it as a game, you look at stats, how many wickets a person takes, how many runs they make, and you leave your analysis there. But the Jamesian analysis, the Caribbean analysis, is an analysis that says cricket is much more than just numbers. Numbers are important, but to understand the game from a Caribbean context is to understand it beyond the boundary. What is the relationship between what's going on the field of play and what's happening among our people? Lots of time for example, we quarrel, I do, with our players today. You know, they're not nationalistic. You know, for them money is important and so forth. The fact of the matter is that those players come from our region. We can't expect to recruit consciousness if consciousness is not in the society themselves. And so it is my firm view that when we talk about people like Admire and you know, I dated back to the Lara era, but coming through to the Gale and Pollards and Bravos, right down to now the Admire and Purans and them. As we critique them, we have to take into consideration they come from our society. It is our society that is giving rise to them. What is the difference in the society? A society that gave rise to Holding, Richards, Clive Lloyd at a particular time, and before that we had the Canais and Sobers and Butchers and Gibbs and Hall and Hunt and so forth. And even before that, the Constantine and the Headleys coming through to the 50s, the 3 W's, Ramadan and Valentine. What is it about the nature of that society that could give rise to that quality of player? And the present society that is giving rise to players who lack consciousness of what they mean. You see? Are our players conscious that when they go onto that field, they're not just representing themselves? They're really representing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people. We're talking about those of us who are at home and abroad. And that what they do on that player field will determine whether we have a good day or a bad day, will determine a lot of other things. Because when they step on that field, they are stepping on that field partly to correct history. Is Etmire aware of that? Is Puran aware of that? And if they're not, as I rather suspect they're not, then what is the source of that lack of consciousness? It has to be in the society itself. And so sometimes the analysis I hear of West Indies cricket, or cricket at all, is an analysis that is based on numbers and not an analysis that goes deeper into the society. And ask ourselves why the poorest nation could dominate cricket between the 1970s and the 1990s. The poorest cricketing nation, beating everybody. Why they did that then? What was happening in the society between 1970s and the 1990s? Of course, we know the 1970s, 1960s, 70s, 1980s, what we call the age of nationalism in the Caribbean. It was a time when we felt that we could do something about our island states, that we could build a society based on equality and justice, that we could confront our former colonial masters on an even playing field. And the cricket field became that. You have two umpires, ostensibly fair. A lot of times they weren't fair, but the rules generally were the same. And we whipped the rest of the world. At the same time, Black American boxers and basketball players are beating the rest of the world. Hello? Is that by accident? Is it by accident that it is in 1950 that we're beating England on England soil for the first time? And in 1950, we are seeing the first signs of what we now know as reggae music, ska, coming into being? Hello? Is it a coincidence that we are beating on the world? We are beginning to beat our colonial masters at Lords, where they saw it. And reggae is emerging. And the whole set of Caribbean novelists, from Naipaul to Selvon to Meta Halsey to Martin Carter, and novelists and poets are emerging in the 50s, George Lamin. Is it an accident? No, it's not an accident. It's a society in motion. And so that's how we analyze cricket here. That's how we analyze music. That's how there's a linkage between what's happening on the cricket field. One of my idols is Carl Hooper. I hear people say all the time he was a failure and didn't live up to his expectation and all. I don't buy that analysis. He played over 100 test matches. He made over 5,000 runs. He took over 100 catches. He took over 100 wickets. And his very presence on the field may not have yielded runs for him, but may have yielded runs others when he danced down the wicket to the best spinners in the world. Created doubts in their mind so that somebody at the other end. That's how you analyze our cricket, I think. Good evening. Please share the link. We're ready to go. My brother, my brother Butcher is here. And Brother Butcher, I know you're a numbers man.
Yes.
I know you are more than a numbers man.
Yes.
All right. So here we are again for another week. We are counting down to the World Cup. It's going to be here in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks or so. Sir Courtney Ambrose came out and said that he thinks the West Indies is going to win. Brian Lara says that he thinks that we're going to get into the finals. More and more we are hearing that analysis coming from some of our past players, that this may be West Indies time. But before you go there, I just want to put to you the notion of trying to understand where our cricket is. Because to understand West Indies cricket today, you can't start with what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what's happening in the present. You have to look at the arc of it. And as I am arguing, you have to look at how the society has evolved from the 1920s when we played 1928, our first test match, or made our first story in 1906, how it has evolved over time. Do you accept that thesis, what I call the Jamesian thesis of understanding West Indies cricket?
Yeah, good evening, Dr. Hines. Good evening to your viewers and your listeners. Yes, I'm a keen West Indian cricket historian. Since I was a little boy, I go back to the there was a program in 1978, 50 years of West Indies cricket. It was an audio program. And it came over the radio once a week. Every week they would have a decade or something, but produced by Tony Kosher. And it was from that that audio program, it was celebrating 50 years of us in Test cricket, that I became very keen on the history of West Indies cricket. And I have never separated our cricket from the society. Hence, I would say, when I think last week when we spoke, I said, although the societies, the countries have the same name, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Antigua, etc., the societies in which these players are coming out from are not the same societies of the players of bygone eras. Their values are different. The way they look at the world is different. Their understanding of who they are as Caribbean people, whom they represent, is not something they have been schooled in. So you see them making choices, and we looking at them as if they are aliens, because we looking at them through the lens of how, because we would have come up in a different era. We had a different appreciation. And I have scolded my Caribbean friends, those in the Caribbean that like to scold these youngsters. I always tell them, what society are these youngsters emerging from? Yeah. They are not different than any of the young people around the world, but what they are representing is not being represented in our societies today. I mean, for example, one of the things you could look in our societies amongst the young people is this hyper-materialism. Right? They will reflect that they're coming out of the same society. So those values will be there, and West Indies cricket is unique in the world, the cricket world. Nowhere else in the world has that legacy. And so our young people, because they're not understanding that, they think they are just cricketers. And cricket is not just cricket in the West Indies. It is not just cricket. There is a whole colonial legacy that comes with our cricket. As I said last week, I remember my dad telling me the story when they got to England in '63. Worrell told them, look, when y'all walk out in the field, it's not just we playing for or the fans. It's all them black man everywhere, because the winning is the difference between they getting fired or walking into work with their chest puff up. And then also those players had a mental, because many of them, either the nations was on the verge of becoming quote unquote independent or had just gained independence. So they were trying to get their foot in. That's why I have argued to people why people of that generation call the Sobers, the Butcher, the Kanai, the Hall, the Griffith greats. When you look at the numbers of some of them, you would not put them in the category of great statistically. But why they were great, they put the Caribbean on the map. They made Caribbean people men and women that could walk proudly anywhere in the world because of what they did by defeating the colonial master, beating them like a drum up and down in the 60s, right? And I have said this, because of the environment, those teams in the 60s will have an iconic status among a certain generation of Caribbean people, even Clive-like teams would never have. because of the environment in which they did the business. You see? So
Yes.
yeah, I never separate the stats from the environment and when we're talking about West Indies cricket.
And I'm very glad you made that point, because we can divide our cricket into segments, our cricket history. We have the colonial period, which would start in the 1800s when they first brought the game, to the 1950s, late 1940s after the war, the colonial period. And then we have the decolonization period, the period when we are now getting into independence. And that period would last from the late 40s until the late 60s. Your father, of course, was part of that decolonization team. They are helping us to bring in independence, you know? And then you had the nationalist period. That's when we begin to beat them now, right? We are our own nations. We have our own sense of who we are in the world. We are saying to the colonialists, now is our chance to build our nation. And the cricket explodes in the period of nationalism. It was, you and I would know that, our generation.
Yes.
We are of that generation.
Yes, yes.
We are listening to Bob Marley. We are not reading Shakespeare. We are reading Caribbean novelists. We don't have to look to Bradman and the Australians anymore for heroes. They're there. And so you have the nationalist period. And then we have the post-nationalist period. This is the period that we are in. The Cold War ends. They say that our national experiments failed. The IMF comes in and says, you have to move from collectivity to individualism. And so the Gales and the Bravos and the Admirers, they are products of this post-nationalist era.
Yes, they are. They are.
You see, and if we see how cricket, I'm so glad you mentioned no mistake, Larry Constantine. How we play cricket today as West Indian, how we bat, how we bowl, how we feel, is due to Larry Constantine. He created the blueprint for West Indian batsmanship, fielding, and bowling. You look at his stats.
They're
ordinary.
They're not gaudy at all.
Ordinary.
Yes.
But his impact on the game,
the style of
tremendous in the Caribbean.
Yes.
We are Larry Constantine cricketers. He set the mold. And note, bat, bowler, we often talk about Gary Sobers, who's undoubtedly the greatest. But if Sobers were not there, Constantine would be, but his numbers are not pretty. No. Headley's numbers are better, but Headley played just a handful of test matches.
Yes. And because in those days we didn't play much. I mean, he played every test match we played from the time he debuted, which was only 16 or 17 test matches, right? So and Headley also is so important because for the first time a West Indian cricketer could be called one of the best in the world, or if not the best. I often tell this story, and this is what I learned from the same 50 years of West Indies cricket. Headley, when he got to Australian 31, was reputed as the finest off-side play in the game, even more so than Bradman. And he had never seen leg break bowling before. And great Australian leg spinner Clary Grimmett dismantled him in the early test matches. And between the second and third test matches, he had a lot of time and he practiced. And when he left Australia, Clary Grimmett said he was the finest onside player he had ever seen. So I have said to people, well, if he arrived as the finest offside player and left as the finest onside player, he must be the best, although the stats may not show that because Bradman's zone was outer-worldly. But Headley was playing with a team that, if Headley don't make, the team don't make. He had the occasional other guys would make runs, but as they called him back then, Atlas, he had the world on his shoulders every time he walked out the bat. He had all the descriptions about Headley saying he was the best wicket batsman. No, that tells you the tremendous skill he had to have to be able to negotiate on a bad wicket. So all those things I add up, And I say Headley is second to none. And because and him, he is the progenitor of the West Indian batsmanship in terms of that style and flair and great skill that we would see coming down the decades later on. You know, I was fortunate to know a man who played with Headley in the West Indies team, and he went on the last tour before the war. A man named Ken Bam Bam Weeks. Met him.
Yes.
He taught this is show you how the cricket played. He said he was not supposed to play the last test at the Oval, but Ivan Barrow wanted to go and play the dogs, you know, going to bet on the dogs. So he got brought back into the 11 and made his only test 100. And, you know, the story is because I met him in the company of my father, and the two of them were comparing their eras, the stories of when they played and so on. And just as we're talking about the colonial thing, he told us on his team, the white players did not mix with the black players when they got off the field. And he said Headley at the time was a professional playing in the leagues, and Headley had disposable income, and he would take the black players out to dinner, where the Grants and the Gomez's and so on, the Stallmeyers, etc., they went out aside from them. And so that divide was clear there. And even the great Australian all around the Keith Miller talked about when he came to Barbados, he was so fascinated. He got to meet the 3Ws, and John Goddard had a function at his house. So he's all happy he's going to get to chat with the 3Ws. He arrived at John Goddard's house, and he asked John Goddard, where are the 3Ws? He said, I do not mix with them. And he turned around and walked out the house. No, all of these guys are playing on the same team. So you're seeing all those colonial class things. And you know, there are many more stories as that like that when you hear from the players who had played in those eras.
Played in that era, and of course, you know, the folklore has it that Goddard had a big hand in Gilchrist.
No, that's Alexander.
Alexander, sorry, Alexander. Goddard was.
I know that story intimately.
You have because your father was on that tour.
Yes, he was on the team.
Yeah.
So I got you know, it was funny when Alexander died. Well, firstly, people said a lot of things about Gilchrist, and back in the 90s, my father got so upset about it that he decided to write an article. I think it was either published in the Chronicle. I think it was the Chronicle, and to clear the air and give exactly what the story was. So I knew intimately, and it was funny when Alexander died, to hear people repeating things about Gilchrist, saying that Gilchrist pulled the knife on him in Karachi. Gilchrist never got to Pakistan. You know, he was sent home after the last game in India. Yet still people accusing him of pulling a knife on Alexander in Karachi or some place like I hear Alan Davison repeating that lie. You know, and it was unfortunate because Worrell wanted Gilchrist to go to Australia in 66-1, and appealed to the board, and the board turned him down. Now, I have said to people, could you imagine West Indies in that period would have had Hall, Griffith, Gilchrist, and Sobers and Tips? Who beating that bowling? We would have had a 4-prong before the 4-prong that came later down in the 70s with those guys. You know, and from my father, and I heard Sober say the same. My father said Gilchrist is the fastest bowler you ever see or face in your life.
Yes, I've spoken to cricketers who played with him. They said, you know, maybe in the modern era, Patrick Patterson probably they said come closest.
Yes.
As fast as he was. But talking about Worrell, you know, and the last time we talked about the strike with the youngsters at that time, Hoop and Laro were youngsters in South Africa. We know of the Packer era. But what is not always known is that Worrell, who is today revered as not just Sir Frank Worrell, but he's like a statesman. A statesman. Yes. But Worrell was called the cricket Bolshevik because he refused to
Yes.
go on the 48 tour
48 to India.
because he wasn't being paid proper wages.
Correct.
And they call him the cricket Bolshevik, meaning
correct.
I'll stick to that because sometimes when we are hitting these youngsters, we forget that there's a lot of what they are doing now were done in eras gone by.
Correct.
But it was done with a more organized sense.
Yes.
Of what Warrell knew is worth, both in terms of wages and salary. He understands the relationship between work, between labor, and outcomes, wealth, and he understood his role as a West Indian. And he Warrell was what, 23, 24 at that time. So he was an old man.
No.
When he refused to go on that day. Speak to that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you this too on terms of that. My dad in 1965, Kenny Wishart sent him to represent Guyana at the West Indies board meeting. And the upcoming series tour was England to 66. And at that time, if you remember, West Indies had beaten Australia at home in 65, beaten England in 63. So we were the unofficial world champions. And my dad got up in the meeting and said, we are the world champions, and we are going to be getting paid less than the England team we're going to play against. It should not be so. And the Barbados representative, I think it was a man named Erskine, I think my father said, got up and said to Stallmeyer, Jeffrey, is what Basil's saying, is that so? And a big discussion came around, and as a result, the West Indies team were paid higher than the England players for the 66 tour. And Wishart, apparently Alan Ray was the representative in Jamaica, called Wishart, and he said to Wishart, it's the first time Guyana ever had representative at this meeting. I get up as a player. But Warrell was a progenitor to that. And those things, I think sometimes those things should be spoken about, elevated about the stance at royalty to sacrifice not going on a tour because they were not being paid well. Because again, that was the colonial setup. You guys are helpers, you know, you should be happy that you are in this mix. And that's the way, and that culture of treating West Indies cricketers as something that was from the start, and that culture still prevails to this day, despite what I call the neo-colonialists, because they have never destroyed that. So we have people that look like us treating the players unprofessionally in today, which is a way more professional environment. In those days, you had a job and you won't play cricket, so you know it's a semi-pro thing. You're not even semi-pro. You know, you get a stipend, you go and play. Today, now, this is a professional sports in multi-billion dollars. The professionalism that is required by administrators vis-a-vis our cricketers is not there. So as a result, that strained relationship continues to this day. And more so now, these guys got options. In those days, if you play West Indies, that's it, right? Now these guys have all the options. So they're not going to take the nonsense from the board. So to me, that is a relationship that is primary that has to be repaired. So we have a respectful, professional relationship between players and administrators for our cricket to move to where we want it to go, outside of the governance.
Right. Basil, I'm going to ask you, it's a question that I'm sure you've been asked a million times, and you would have answered a million times. But I have to ask you here. We know the lay of the land today. We know the sports industrial complex that cricket, like, you know, education and everything now has become big business, right? We are aware of that. We are aware that the present crop of cricketers today, they have money partly on their mind, understandably so. They're not just going out and playing and saying, I'm playing for the nation. In their mind, I'm playing for the nation, and I'm also playing to secure my own future and that of my family. But it seems to me that the cricketers from other parts of the world are able to strike a balance. So,
Mm.
for example, Butler and the English players in the
They all
IPL,
left.
they're
They all
gone.
left.
They're
Yes.
gone.
Yes.
And no worry, no big deal, no
Yes.
nothing, no quarrel with the board, and
Mhm.
so on. I get the sense that some or the other West Indian cricketers, and by extension, the West Indies board,
Yes.
they have not been able to work this thing out. And I have to tell you, as a West Indian nationalist, who has had to confront all my life that we don't think rationally as Caribbean people, as Black people, that we our emotions are the things that come to the fore and not reason. And I'm wondering, why is it the players look at Bangladesh? They pull, what's his name, the fastball who was one of the top bowlers of that, but they pulled him.
Yes. Yes.
Mustafur, I think it's
Yeah,
his name.
Mustafa Khan. Yeah, the left arm seamer. Yeah.
That's right, and he's gone. No fuss, no nothing.
Right.
Why is it in the Caribbean we're not able to get? My God, we have produced Sir Arthur Lewis. We have produced C.L.R. James, and I am confining it here to thinkers, right?
Yeah,
It's not.
we have produced icons in the world.
Oh my God, with all that brains that come from our region,
yes,
and that surface the world.
Yes.
When you consider Walter Rodney is
Correct.
much more known in Africa.
Yes.
Here is a West Indian turned upside down.
More than in his own country. More than in his own country.
What is it in your estimation? I know you deal with sports, nutrition, and fitness, and you also have to deal with sports psychology because they all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm asking you a question here that is bordering on psychology. Why we can't get it together?
I mean, that's something we have debated, over the years, and I think what has happened, there has been an erosion in our foundation of our West Indian cricket. And anywhere in the world, the foundation is similar. The foundation of our cricket is club and school cricket. It is in those arenas you get your, and I use the word indoctrination about what it is West Indies cricket is about, who are your icons, and you learn about all of these things in your school and more so in your club, right? Because when you get to club, that's when you become a little more serious about the game, that you have aspirations when you start playing club cricket, right? School, you take it on and so on. But then if you really want to take it to the next level, you go and join a club. And that erosion of the club environment, there was a time where in our club cricket, you played with national players, current national players, some just past national players, even former West Indies players, or even sometimes current West Indies players would be featured in your club cricket. So you got up close mentorship, tutorship, the whole nine about being a cricketer to represent first your club, your country, etc. What West Indies cricket was about, because these people ingrained that into you. If you look from the time when players know, and I noticed this thing I would say in the 90s, because a lot of things that erosion may have started in the 80s. And when we look from a Guyana perspective, Guyana was, when you could count on your one hand how many Guyanese players back in the 70s and so on gone and play in England, whether it's county or club or league cricket. You could count on your one hand how many Guyanese cricketers were there, right? But as the 80s came into the 80s, lots more guys started to go to England. And I remember, I always tell the story, DCC club, the club I always go and hang out when I go home. There was a youngster named wicketkeeper, batsman Darwin Christian.
Darwin Christian.
I come at the club. I hear somebody tell me, "By Butch, we got a bad little boy named Christian, Christian. And every time I come home, either, for see test cricket, because I know Christmas time cricket generally ain't playing. But it's when I come home in April or whatever to come to see test cricket, you're going to get the club cricket starting right after and so on. Every time I come home, Christian, he in Trinidad playing. So when I got to watch DCC play, there's no Christian to see. And the first time I'm going to see Christian play a cricket match is when they start streaming regional cricket. And I see a game Christian play for Guyana. And I know this guy, hearing this name for years. I actually met him because the Christmas time he would be home. And I met him, so I knew him. But I never got to see him play. What I'm saying, in the 90s, we started to see another phenomenon from a Ghana perspective, where, again, players are leaving, and these were usually the best players, gone to Trinidad to look money. You can't fault them, but what was suffering in the interim? The foundation of our cricket, the club cricket in Guyana, just using the Guyana as an example. So you are having guys playing now first division who should never be on a first division team, but because the best players were away. And that cycle perpetuated, was never addressed. So these youngsters wouldn't know about the groundings they should get receiving from these senior players. Look, 2018, I went home for Easter. And Easter Monday, DCC, there's always get a nice little hang, and my little nephews and nieces and cousins, we decided we're going to go to DCC so the kids could fly the kite. And my parents came with us. And my dad was, he was ill, he wasn't as well. And when we walking in, I said to him, you recognize this place? He said, yeah, DCC. I bust their ass plenty. That was the words, right? And he said, I'm in the car and, open the car, don't watching the children. And Gavin Ned, the coach, DCC at the time, come and said, boy, I got to carry my son for meet the big man here, boy. And he carry his son. A lot of the youngsters from DCC, all of them was there. And after Gavin did that, all of them come in a line to meet Basil Butcher. And you know what was the saddest part about this, Dr. Hines? Not a single one of them knew who was Basil Butcher.
Who was Basil Butcher? Yeah.
Not one of them. No. In a proper club environment. And the thing about it, I think my father picture up on the wall in DCC, if I'm not mistaken. They got a picture of him up on the wall at DCC. But this erosion of understanding West Indies cricket from the ground level is a problem. Even like the stadium, I have said this, the argument about we should name the Providence Stadium. And I said, one of the things why that would be great, if you put names up on the stands, because these youngsters are Googleists. When you say you got a stand named Butcher, Kanai, Solomon, for example, none of them don't know who's them names. But when they go on Google, they can be like, them is Guyanese, look what they do, blah. To feel now, these are people they need to check out a little bit more. And another thing to Dr. Hines, our young players, if you ask them who is the cricket hero, more likely than not, they're going to call a foreign player.
A foreign player, Indian or Australian.
In the past generation.
Oh Lord.
Never happened. Everybody wanted to be whoever was a West Indian star. As a little boy, you're playing in the street, you want to be this West Indian batsman or this West Indian bowler, etc. So all of those things, all those little things add up to why our young players don't have that appreciation, because the structure within which they're coming up do not inculcate in them that appreciation. Unlike, say, a young Australian child comes into the Australian cricket structure and is inculcated by the green cap. The Indian child, the English child, South African, etc. You hear these young players talk, how they're proud to represent their country. We don't hear that from the West Indian.
Yeah. When you listen to West Indian cricketers, they talk about our fans.
Yes.
Not the West Indian people,
No.
not the Caribbean people. They're fans. It's in their heads. It's just a game because game got fans.
Yes.
But
No, for example, Sir IVA Richards is a name to this generation. It's just a name.
Yeah.
No, if they knew, and I feel for this generation, Sir IVA should be studied not just because of his prowess, but what he stood for as a West Indian cricketer, as an African man. What he
political,
exactly.
an overtly political cricketer,
Exactly.
because they all were political cricketers, but he was overtly political.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. He should be studied for that because
yeah.
he has often been castigated by some in the Caribbean when you try to highlight those political stances of IVA or IVA, which, you know, I remember the one when he said the West Indies team is an African team. Oh God, and I had some serious knockdown debates with people who disagreed with it, and I said I agreed with his position. But people like them it should be studied, so a young player will get an appreciation for what these guys. When you hear these guys talk about, you know, watching the players today and so on, they will get appreciation because of the context these guys are coming from. You know, Sir Andy Roberts, still to this day, he just wear his emotion on his sleeves when it comes to West Indies cricket. When they lose, you know, he just take it on. You know?
Yeah.
So,
in case you're just
and you know, sometimes I tell you, I said, man, how you still? He said, boy, let me tell you something. It's West Indies cricket, give me all I get. So why am I not going to take it on? You see?
Yes. In case you're just joining us, yes, it's West Indies Cricket 101, the place to be on a Sunday evening. And I'm on here with Basil Butcher Jr. We are talking about West Indies cricket in its larger perspective. You know, Basil, I met you for the first time 24 years ago. It's that long. Carl Hooper had retired in 1999, and he came back, and at Eveillery, there was a practice match there to see Carl Hooper play in a practice match, and I was there, and I am telling you, I was already a PhD. I consider myself fairly important, but I wanted to be next to Carl Hooper because in my head, he represented something much more than I represent. You see, he was a cricketer, and he was in the position, I think, to represent my feelings, to represent my thinking about my country and my region and my people. And I did. And I wanted to be next to him. Yes. And when I got there, I realized I was not the only one.
Exactly.
There was so many of us there around Carl. And the old talk, I remember Victor, remember his name?
Benjamin
was there. And I remember following Victor Benjamin in Case Cup as a small boy. So I wasn't just meeting Carl. I was meeting Victor Benjamin. And to listen to the two of them, of, in a sense, two different generations. Talk about cricket. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It is still one of those moments that I go when I'm about to go to sleep in the night and I'm thinking where my life is. I go back there, and of course I met you, who was Basil Butcher's son, and Butcher, as I said, for me is the pioneer of a new kind of West Indian batsmanship that departed from the flamboyant, expansive, and he would have laid the groundwork for Larry Gomes, and later on as Shiv Chandapal, and now we have Craig Brathwaite.
But I would say though, Brathwaite is more in the vein of the Beechans. From what I understand, my father was a bunch, but I tell you that was deliberate on his part because those who knew him when he first came down to Georgetown, Canai and all them, he was the flamboyant batsman. He was the big bad.
So I heard.
But what happened, you remember, he got dropped. Because I asked him this question, because I got an old-timer friend who played it, saw them from when they started. He played Case Cup back in the days with them. And he told me, and I asked my dad the question, he says, Skipper, when I got back in the team, Rohan was a star. Rohan could make a few, could fail and don't get dropped. I know how to re-establish myself. So I could not be as flamboyant as I probably was when I was a younger player, because I can't afford, because he had this saying, I come from Shitwater Creek and I ain't going back there.
Right.
So that was his why, that was his motivation to stay in the West Indies team, perform. So that was why he wasn't as flamboyant, because I've read stories where they call him Mr. Crisis. Many times West Indies in crisis, and Butcher came in and Butcher helped to steer them out of the crisis and so on and so forth. And yes, I would say he was probably that batter that led to the Larry Gomes, that stabilizer in the middle, that you would say that Larry Gomes, and well, hopefully we'll find another one.
and so on. Yes, Rohan Babulal Kanai was already a star. My favorite West Indian batsman, I think he's the best batsman coming out of Guyana, Guyana's best batsman. And of course, he's in my top 5, but I know you have some disagreement with my top.
Kanai? No,
yes.
Oh, no, Kanai. You know, it's funny. We have a lot of debates and discussions about top 5s and all those things, and they're fun debates. You know, I know a guy who played cricket for Guyana that rate Kanai ahead of Sobers. He was a Kanai man. You know, when we in the park in New York, the late Vincent Mears, you couldn't tell.
Oh yes, Vincent Mears. Yes.
Tell Mears about Kanai, red Kanai, you know,
yes. I share that view. I think Kanai pips Sobers as pure batsmanship. Hard. It's hard not to give Sobers the edge. His numbers are superior. So when two players are cush in ability, then what determines the edge is numbers. That's when, to me, numbers kick in.
I mean, when I first heard Mearsy raise that argument, I called my father and I asked him. Well, he played with both men. He was in the team. He see them up close, and he said, "Skipper, runs." He just stopped right there, runs. He said, "Look at the runs," because one of the things people would often say, Kanai got, I think, about 7 or 8 90s. 7, something like that.
Ian Calitran.
Right?
Calitran and Richardson.
Yes. They got a lot of 90s.
2090s.
And I told some people, this is to show you, because some people look at Kanai's average, he averaged 47, or he is not an all-time this. I said, just think about this guy. Because my father said, Rohan was a guy who always took high risks. Rohan looking to play shots that he shouldn't play, right? So as a result, he trying to play a high-risk shot and throw his wicket. Now, if he was a little more temperate with that, imagine this guy, those 90s were converted into 100. I think he would have had something like 22 test 100s in 79 tests. And Viv Richards got 121 tests and 2400. That puts it in context how good a player he was, you know. But, you know, he don't have the magical 50.
and of course, he came in at 3.
Exactly.
When at the time when we didn't have Grange and Haynes, you had Hunt with a whole set of
somebody else,
right? So ostensibly, invariably, a West Indian wicket will go down within the first half an hour or hour, and Kanai was out there. And then a lot of people don't remember that he kept wicket in his early days and opened the batting too. Sometimes, for me, the greatest Guyanese batsman.
Yes, there's no doubt. I agree with that 100%. Kanai is the best batsman to come out of Guyana.
Basil, Your brother and former Guyana wicket keeper, Bamfield, he's raised the question about IPL and West Indies cricket at the moment. I don't know if we didn't notice it before, and now we're noticing our players are, in a sense, were tied up in the IPL. Let's look at it. Puran got a fair chance and took advantage of it. I mean, he just bullied the bowling.
He's had his best. He's had his best IPL season ever.
Right. Narayan had a chance to open and also thing, and it was Narayan miserly with the ball.
Clearly his best all wrong IPL by millions of miles.
Yes. Andre Russell, as usual, he got a chance to play quite a bit. But when you look at Etmire, comes in the chances that he got, plays 5 or 6 balls, that's it.
Yeah.
The same thing with our captain, right? Hope gets a game here and there, but he didn't get a run. He didn't get a run. He got games, but not a run. And then when you think about Joseph and Rutherford and Kyle Mears, Joseph got 1 game. The others didn't get anything. Shepherd got a couple of games, but not a run.
Right.
You know, and so Stephen Bamfield is raising the point. Was it deliberate in the way they, for example, treated Joseph? So the team doesn't have a chance. Didn't have a chance at a certain point of getting in to the playoffs, and yet they didn't give him another game. One would think that, okay, there's no chance of getting into the playoffs, right? So we are playing here with a plan probably for next year and so on and so forth. But they didn't give him another game. Are we getting into the realm of conspiracy theory to begin to think that there must be something manipulative about India and the way they've dealt with the rest of us? Look at Patan, Orphan Patan reaction to the players who left.
Yeah, of course.
Purely ethnocentric, I would say.
Gavaskar too.
Yeah.
Had a similar response to Patan. The West Indian players, I often sometimes scratch my head when the IPL, the coaches and how they pick their teams and so on and so forth. I often scratch my head. I mean, look at Alzari Joseph. He had 3 bad games. He did have 3 bad games. He got dropped. He never got off the bench.
Never got another chance.
Again. Whereas you look at, but people may argue, but still, I think it's similar. Look at Stark. Stark had some very poor games right off the top, but they kept with Stark. People might say, oh, because Stark getting even more bigger money, but still, Alzari, in the context of his team, Alzari is getting over $1 million, right? So, you 3 games and he never gets another chance to show what he can do. I didn't expect Shepherd to really play much at all. I didn't expect that at all. I didn't expect Myers, because Myers played the year before a lot, because Myers did something which other West Indians probably need to understand in franchise cricket. When you get your opportunity, you got to jump on it right away. There's no long leash you're getting, right? And if you remember, the Cock had international duty for South Africa. So he missed the first 2 games or something like that. Myers got the chance to open, and from game 1, jumped up half century. And they couldn't put him on the bench. The Cock got the Indian, had to imagine the Cock sitting on the bench because of his play, right? I am surprised that Shamar Joseph never got another chance, because in that 1 game alone that I saw, because that's one of the games I watched every ball he bowled. I thought this guy showed those elements that you would salivate to want to give another chance, right? And I am surprised that that team did not give him another chance to play again. You know, their cricket rationale, because even on that team, Matthew Hayden and some other commentators of high note were very critical of why they batted Puran so low down the order. Matthew Hayden's mind, Puran should not be batting lower than 3 because of all that he brings to it. And actually, one of the games when he was commentating and they got to speak to the coach Langer, Matthew Hayden came hard at him about that. And Langer gave his spiel as to why we feel Puran could win the game from any batting position and blah, 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 blah. You know, but win the game from any batting position, but maybe why not let him try to win the game from 3 rather than coming at 5, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so the IPL is one of the things I noticed with the IPL. They're the most data-driven cricket league in the world. They make a lot, too much, in my view, decisions based on data, more so than sometimes actually looking at the skill set of the player and that innate gut feeling about a player. That data can't, you know, certain variables about a player that, you know, you want to put that player in that situation because they have these characteristics.
So it's a dilemma for us. I mean, our players are earning money, and thank God.
Yeah.
You have to say thank God. I mean, you and I and most of us, we come from where those guys come from.
Just a note, Dr. Hines, I have to leave in about 5 minutes. 5 minutes, right?
Right. Let me get you in on this question. So we assume that Etmire and Powell and Dre Russell will be there for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So
well as, unfortunately, as well as Rutherford. KKR did not release him.
KKR, yes. God, Rutherford will have to stay there.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody at the West Indies board, and they were saying they were talking to KKR, but we saw the team pick. Did you see the team that's been selected to play against South Africa? Had he been released, he would have been on that team. So
well, that's where I was going, yeah.
It tells you that they did not release him. So those are the 4 players, West Indian players, I think are the ones. Oh, as well as Alzari Joseph for the RCB.
Yes.
Because they're in the playoffs also, right? And I mean, come on. You didn't play this guy the entire freaking tournament. Let the guy release the guy.
Let the guys go and play. You know?
You're not going to play him.
You're not going to play them in the finals? I'd be surprised if they were to play Joseph in the finals.
I mean, or even Rutherford for KKR. Because are you going to now trust the guy that did not see the field for the entire tournament and trust him to bring you home in the business end, which is the playoffs? The chances are not. No, they're slim to none, you know. But well, you see, and also think about this too, Dr. Hines, in terms of the English players and so on. West Indies board don't have the same footing in world cricket as the BCCI, right? West Indies board have oftentimes, BCCI would say they have done us a solid. You're coming to the Caribbean and all these multiple tours, because every time you come, we make serious money. That's the biggest money making tour, right? So whereas England is different. They could tell the BCCI, our guys are leaving before the playoffs with the World Cup. And this is something that seriously needs to be looked at. The BCCI, you know, there's a World Cup going on. Why are you going to have your tournament going so far in, so close to? Well, are you telling us that the IPL is more important than the World Cup? Because that's essentially what they're saying. That is more important than the World Cup. Because here, we think we are bad. Look at South Africa. probably about 9 or 10 of the guys in the South Africa team about that is in the World Cup squad. So I want to know how many of them going to be playing in the series against us. I got to check to see who got to the playoffs from South Africa.
South Africa and New Zealand, they have a lot of players there, the nucleus of their team.
Yeah. We got to see who in the playoffs and check the rosters to see how many of the South African players that, because I know Rabada already left.
Yeah, Rabada left.
Maybe some of our guys should have framed an injury. They should have framed an injury. Because Rabada said he got some soft tissue infection, he had to leave.
Yes, my brother Keith Branch is saying only the CPL gives preference to international players over local players. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think so. Remember, you got a limit of 4 players overseas you could play on your roster in any given 11. You're only allowed 4 internationals, and I always think about it. These franchises would, like say a CPL, they would invest a lot more in an international player than a local player. So I think that's what they invest that kind of money to got an international player
on the bench.
Those are the things West Indian cricket fans often get caught up in, because we are so accustomed to our local domestic cricket is nationalistic. Right? It's not these considerations of franchise cricket has discombobulated many West Indian fans. And the fans who have mostly been discombobulated with this is the Bajan fans. They could not understand how Bajan can't be in the 11 because the team played in Barbados. It's not the Barbados national team. It's a local
Butcher, it took me a little while, eh?
All of us.
It took me a little while. I couldn't jump up for the Amazon Warriors. I mean, I'm not being ethnocentric, but I just couldn't understand Tahir captaining.
And for me, why I'm an Amazon Warriors fan is because they're in Guyana.
That's right.
That's why I jump on the bandwagon from day one. The nationalistic thing. I identify with Guyana, so there's no other regional team I can be rooting for, for Guyana. So that was an automatic thing for probably all of us in the Caribbean. We became fans of where the franchise is based on where we come from.
Where we come from, Basil Butcher. I'll quickly, half a second. You satisfied with the team that they picked there for South Africa? Against South Africa?
Yeah, I don't think they got anybody that maybe I've heard people talking about Sinclair, but with Chase, I don't see Sinclair getting the mix. So why you want to give Chase the reps, right? For the World Cup. So it wouldn't make sense to bring a Sinclair in that. He's the only one I could see there was a possibility to be in that mix, but for those reasons, I don't think it's a bad idea. I will tell you, Dr. Hines, I'm looking forward to see Mr. Joseph running against South Africa. I am looking forward to see that because I know the cock will be playing.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So, I mean, South Africa, maybe the next time we talk, South Africa is one of the teams that is a very dangerous team.
Very dangerous.
Not more than I have South Africa as one of the favorites because they have a dynamic bowling lineup with 2 top-class spinners. The left arm and the left arm Google Chinaman one, Shamsi and Mirage, right? And even Markham could come and bowl his off break, the captain. And then they have a pace attack that's second to none. And in that batting lineup, you got Klaasen, De Kock, and Miller, David Miller, that could match Lumber with any team in. And the difference is with those guys and our Lumber guys, those guys are all proven match winners. They have done it on many occasions for their country. Our guys are not so proven in match winning, but they got the Lumber. And I say West Indies is a very dangerous team. The thing I'm very cautious about is our bowling attack. I don't know if we could defend the runs. That's the problem.
Yes, yeah. No, Decock and Phil Salt. When I look at those guys, you remember when we were little boys, they had a Jamaican named Basil Shotgun Williams.
Oh yeah, Shotgun Williams. I was fortunate to see his test debut 100 at Border.
At Border, I saw that 100 at Border too.
I remember when I met him in person after I said Shotgun. I remember when you played the 3 straight cuts off of Jeff Thompson at your batting at Regent Street end. He coming from North Road. And then Thompson pick up the ball and pelt you at the end of the over. He said to me, "Young Butcher, you remember that? A lot of people didn't talk about that. He pelted me with the ball."
Yeah. Basil Shotgun Williams and Andrew Monster Light. Yes, these guys today, I said if Light and Basil Shotgun Williams were there today,
come today, they would walk in the team.
Oh my goodness.
And you know the funny thing, the first time I'm gonna hear this with my ears, my own ears, because me and my 2 brothers, we were supposed to sit. And you remember they had that box right next to the side screen in South Stand? We had tickets to sit down there, right? And as we walking through rails, some big men that know we Butcher. And we go over there and as little youngsters.
School by stand.
We hear the big man gaff. We said, I tell me, buddy, no, we stay right there. This gaff too sweet. And we right there by the boundary at where would be Fine Leg. And I remember Jeff Thompson come down and he feeling a fine leg and an Indian guy telling Thompson, "I want you kill them. I kill them. I get 3 calling girl if you kill them." That was the first time I ever heard a West Indian overtly rooting against the West Indies. You know what I mean? And that was an Indian guy, you know, I'd heard about them, Indian folks, when Indian Pakistan come. But that was I remember telling my 2 little brothers, say, "Yeah, I hear the guy. You know talking them, you know."
Basil Butcher Jr. here tonight, turning it up on cricket. West Indies Cricket 101 on a Sunday night. My brother Basil, thanks for coming through.
Yes, man.
Week. And we'll be in touch. We'll see what next week brings.
Yes, I will be available for the full time next week.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Good.
Basil Butcher Jr.
Have a good night.
Cricket analyst, cricket historian. Always a pleasure to speak with him. Always a pleasure to speak with our people on this game called cricket that is more than just a game. Even when we are losing, we really find time for this game. We cannot talk about where we are as a nation, as a Caribbean nation, without talking about this game, cricket. It has had its ups and its downs. And it's interesting to talk to people who have played the game and to really have a sense of what we're going to try to get Stephen Bamfield onto the program. And because I think those ex-players bring to bear something in the conversation that those of us who are beyond the boundary don't always get a chance to understand the dynamics there. And some things that we take for granted may not be for granted. I would like to thank all of you for staying with us on this Sunday evening, and I hope that next week you will join us. But during the week, of course, we have the usual Politics 101. By the time we come next week, the South African series would be on the way, so we will have quite a bit to talk about. Here's hoping that the West Indian team comes through for us. We are due for something to shout and scream about from our boys on the cricket field. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for staying with us. And of course, I am going to see. I see some familiar names here. People joining us from Trinidad. Welcome those of you who were joining us from Trinidad. I see somebody's joining us here from India. Welcome. And I'm going to see you all next week. Please spread the word. Please spread the word that this show is on. Those of you who have not had a chance to see the entire show, of course, it will be there on Facebook and, of course, on YouTube channel. Go to West Indies Cricket 101 with Dr. David Hines and subscribe to that page so we can grow it. Thank you all very much.
rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we batting, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a liquor, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing. Here comes the West Indies. Here comes the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. I tell you now, here comes the West Indies. Here comes the West Indies. Them bad boys gonna bring you to your knees. Here comes the West Indies.